All right, welcome everybody to the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, Jesse Collings, here as always with my trusty co-host, Jason Ounpraseuth. Jason, how's it going?
Doing well, we have a big topic to talk about that, like we just briefly talked about before we start recording, that no one else is really talking about right now. And so just excited to jump into this right away.
Yeah, it's funny. When we were tossing around ideas 2 weeks ago, the last one we recorded, I was like, let's do Daniel Bryan. There's so much to talk about. It's such a big deal that he's, presumably a free agent. Let's do that. And so much has happened over the last 2 weeks that it's like almost people forgot that Daniel Bryan is a free agent, which might be a good thing because if he does make an appearance quite soon, it's almost like be like more shocking because he's not. He's kind of it's kind of been blown off the front page a bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you got like Double or Nothing, which typically in the Battle Royale features like a wild card, like a Joker. That's their gimmick. I don't know if they're still doing that this year. I don't remember hearing that announcement. But yeah, obviously he can always show up in WWE programming anytime he wants. Roman Reigns always needs a new challenger. And so, yeah, he can always pop up anytime he wants.
Yeah, they are doing the Joker gimmick because I think they
Okay.
announced that. I believe on Dynamite this week they announced I think the 20 people that are going to be in
Yeah, I know
the
that.
um, the casino battle royale. And they did show that there would be like a 21st mystery person.
Oh, okay.
We can get into that about like what we think he's gonna when he does show up again. Where do we think he's gonna show up? But I think he's too big of a star for that kind of spot. I mean, the people that they've done
Mhm.
before have been Brian Cage and Matt Sydal, um, which are like they're names that AEW was wise to bring in. Don't get me wrong, but it's not the kind of star that Daniel Bryan is. Daniel Bryan
Yeah.
gets the if Daniel Bryan shows up in AEW, he's getting the John Moxley like return spot where he
Mhm.
just comes out and everyone goes crazy. Like think about the casino battle where like you're just who's number 21 and it's like Daniel Bryan's music hits and the place goes crazy and then he gets in the ring and he's like squaring off with like Stu Grayson or like the Blade or like and not knocking those guys because they're talented
Yeah.
guys, but it's like a different kind of thing. And touching on that, kind of wanted to get in and kind of reflect on Daniel Bryan's time in WWE, kind of specifically the last few years of his career in WWE. But first, just looking at like what his career was like in WWE, there's never been anyone that's had such a strange career. There's never been anyone with such a polarizing presence. If that, I don't know if that's the right term because there have been polarizing stars before, but just someone who has had so much happen to them in WWE and has been at the center of so many interesting things going on with the company that you can almost use as it can be he can be used as an example for basically everything both good and bad about WWE over the past 10 years.
Mhm.
You look back at the original Nexus angle, you look at how he was fired like after the night the Nexus debuted, then he comes back, he has the kind of mid-card, he's a mid-carder, he gets a world title run, he gets the big push, but it's WWE gets drawn into his push, kicking and screaming. He, finds big success. He has to retire because he has injuries, and there's all sorts of things going on with the number of concussions he had, and all the science that kind of went back and forth. There's this whole period where he's a general manager. Then he comes back, and he has another 2 or 3 year run in WWE. That was just so weird. I don't think people reflect on like how weird those last few years for him have been in WWE and kind of what they've been like when in comparison to what we expected they could have been like if he hadn't been injured.
Yeah, I mean, just think about, like, just going back to the Nexus run, like, how foreign, like, Daniel Bryan, before he went to WWE, was the biggest indie star in like the US, at least. I just want to just put it into that context.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes into FCW, into NXT, back when NXT was a reality show. It
Oh, it's
wasn't like
so
what it is
weird.
now.
It's so
Yeah,
weird to think
it's
about that.
it's it's so weird. yeah, they change his name and they act like they a rookie. He's like some nobody,
He's
but
the
like this is the
Mrs.
biggest indie
Protege,
star
which is
ever.
he's the Mrs. Protege, which is a hilarious thing, which is like the Miz is teaching him how to be a wrestler, and it's
Yeah,
really funny. Like if you for following him on the independents, which I really wasn't at the time. I knew about independent wrestling. I knew when he signed that he was this guy who had won a lot of best technical wrestler awards in the Observer and
yep.
was thought of really highly. But I maybe had seen one or two matches from him. I wasn't like a big follower, but it was like it was almost like a joke, which is like, yeah, we're gonna put you with this guy who nobody in the business, really respects, especially from a worker, and he's gonna be your coach, and he's gonna be teaching you things, and um, yeah, that whole reality show of NXT era. That's gonna be our new podcast, Jason. Is we're gonna go back and we're gonna watch every episode. I don't think anyone's doing that. We're gonna watch every episode of like NXT reality TV show where they were doing like little stunts and competitions and
They're doing keg runs. Titus O'Neil had
yeah,
a
I
keg
remember
over his
that.
head, and he
That
tripped.
Yes, and it was like he was really mad because like Daniel Bryan didn't come in last, and everyone thought Daniel Bryan
Yeah.
would come in last. Because I think the idea was that they wanted him to get off the show early because
Oh yeah.
the show was all about getting Wade Barrett over.
Mhm.
And it was tough because Daniel Bryan, even at that point in his career, had a cult following, had the fans that kept voting him in,
Mhm.
and they were like really that got his WWE career off on the wrong foot because he was just annoying management already with his
Yeah.
persistence in getting over and all these fans, screwing up the push for the 6'5" jacked guy, which is what they really wanted to do. But yeah, just like so let's go back to 2018. So he's on WWE programming. He never really goes away. He did commentary for the Cruiserweight Classic, and then he becomes a GM on SmackDown. Him and Shane McMahon are co-GMs, and so he's still on our television. But at the time, it was seen as like this big tragedy, which was that Daniel Bryan was this super big star, and right as when he was getting over, he had these concussion issues, and he was forced to retire, which isn't exactly what happened. Sometimes in memory, it's like I imagine him. He wins the title at WrestleMania 30. He has a few title defenses. Then he gets hurt, and that's it.
Right.
But that's not what happened. He gets
Mhm.
hurt. I think he had a neck injury, and he takes time off. But then he comes back. He was back at the next WrestleMania. I think he won the Intercontinental Championship in a ladder
Yep.
match. And then after that, he gets injured, and that's when he has to retire. And that's one of those things that's like people like will almost never remember that in like 20 years. Everyone will just think he won the title at WrestleMania 30, he got hurt, and he retired. Um,
Right. 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 Mhm.
but so he comes back in 2018. So first, while he's injured, it's seen as this big tragedy, and we're all thinking about, oh, imagine if Daniel Bryan was here. What could have been? What would be happening? Look at all the people he could feud with. He'd be so over. All of this stuff happened, right? What was kind of like your like state about him when your thoughts about him during that period when we presumed he was retired and gone forever?
Well, yeah, just a couple of things. Like one, this is after CM Punk left the company,
True.
and so that left. So while CM Punk left, that opened a hole for Daniel Bryan to obviously get his push. And once Daniel Bryan leaves, that leaves an even bigger hole of who's going to fill in that spot there. Because I was watching like old Raws with Daniel Bryan and CM Punk back when they're both champions of each, and then like it's just how hot those crowds were for those guys, and just to imagine like those guys leaving, that leaves a big hole. Obviously, WWE they go to Roman Reigns as their next successor, but that's not really sort of what the fans wants, and so it did leave a big hole for the company to see one of their legitimately over guys, just leave the company. And, that speech that he makes in Seattle, Washington, or whatever, like in the Washington area, it's still so memorable. Of course, I think now people point out in hindsight, Aubrey Edwards, she's like crying her
Oh
eyes
yeah.
out in the audience. And so it's just a funny thing to watch in hindsight of where it is now. But yeah, it left a big hole. And I'll be honest, like my interest in WWE kind of faint at that point. once Daniel Bryan left. So like there wasn't really a lot of people in the company that kept my interest the way Daniel Bryan did, especially with CM Punk as when he left as well.
Yeah, you raised a good point about that kind of like Roman Reigns was always the guy they wanted to push ahead of everyone, but
Mhm.
Punk and then Bryan had that organic fan connection, and they were like super over. I don't think since then that WWE has been able. Now it's hard because of the pandemic over the last few years, kind of ruining live crowds and not being able to. We have no idea who the organically over people are, but they haven't had that like big. There've been people who are over here and there. They got their fan base here and there, but well, really, I guess Becky Lynch should be the closest person.
That's really it.
Like that kind of organic person. But on the men's side, because the dynamics of who gets over is so different on the men's side than the women's side, just because of the structure and the amount of talent that is on the men's side and how hard it is to get to the main event scene because there's so many people that are trying to do that. It's different, but they really never had that person. The closest is like when Kofi kind of got that organic push.
Yep.
Which ironically, his opponent at WrestleMania that year was Daniel Bryan because they decided to turn him heel. But yeah, you're right about that kind of who is the people's favorite person. Like Roman Reigns is the WWE's choice, and he definitely has his fans. And it's not like he's. I was going to say it's not like he's unpopular, but the guy was getting booed out of the building at the time, so he was unpopular. They wasn't that hair to Daniel Bryan. They never were able to, because Daniel Bryan got over on a fluke, right? He was booked really badly. He was booked to be made like a loser, and he was able to persist because fans reacted to him being booked like a loser and just supporting him more. And he ended up getting over despite basically WWE having no idea how he got over. And the result was that they couldn't just recreate that with someone else who was a small indie guy who was a popular wrestler. But so he comes back. So he comes back in 2018, right before WrestleMania. He makes a speech. He talks about, if you fight for your dreams, then your dreams will fight for you. It's like the best promo in WWE's like last few years, and it's like, oh my God, wrestling is awesome again. Daniel Bryan is back. What's he gonna do? He's gonna be so great. What was kind of like your expectations for him that after that, that return and that night, that now that he's back? Like,
during that time, he was in a feud with Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, and so the prospect of those dream matches, sort of the WWE dream match. Obviously, they've already had matches in the Indies, but just seeing on a WWE stage was exciting to watch. And obviously, a dream match against Shinsuke was a big thing as well, because obviously Shinsuke famously, like the reason he wanted to go to WWE was to have a dream match with Daniel Bryan, which he never got when he first came in, at least. And just all the dream matches were on the table there for Daniel Bryan. But I'll admit, initially when he was in the ring, there was always that worry there. Of course, I think similar with when Christian came back, I think fans were very worried about Christian, like, one bad bump, something could go wrong, especially with Sting as well, someone even older. But at least for Bryan on the younger side, he kind of felt reassured, but there's still a bit of terror anytime he took a bad bump.
There was that period for me, which was like watching him, and even like watching him work. Like he would do little things that I was like, oh my God, he's so smart to avoid like any incidents where he would do like his running drop kicks in the corner, and instead of just doing a drop kick and landing, like taking a straight back bump, he like used one of his arms to like pull himself into the ropes. He did like almost like a little flip every time he did the drop kick to avoid taking a bump. And I remember him doing that and being like, oh, dude, that guy's so smart to avoid taking that bump by doing this like cool little trick. And it kind of looked cool too.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right. There was that sense that it was like, now I don't have that sense because he's been wrestling for a few years now that I don't have. But you're right. There was that kind of like, and the doctors cleared him, so that's all you can say is that the doctors cleared him and he's good to go. But there was definitely that sense of like kind of fear. It's like, oh my God, hope he doesn't get hit in the head. Oh, was that that punch looked close? Oh, was that all that kind of stuff. But so you talked about dream matches, right? Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens. What if I told you, Jason, that he could have those dream matches, but they'd also involve Shane McMahon? Because his first match back was at WrestleMania that year, WrestleMania 34, and he was tagging with Shane against Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. Now, that would not be my return match for Daniel Bryan, because he comes back right before WrestleMania, and you're like,
Mhm.
you could use this Daniel Bryan match to like sell WrestleMania, put him in a big singles match against somebody. And they didn't really do that. They used him, but it was very much a mid card match. He's helping out Shane McMahon because Shane McMahon needs a match at WrestleMania, and it did make sense from storyline because like they were the two co-GMs and they were feuding with Zayn and Owens over at the time, so it did make sense, but kind of starts this trend of what Daniel Bryan was doing. Like when Daniel Bryan comes back, right? He's like the easiest to book babyface in the history of society. Everyone is already just so pumped for him to come back. What a great story. He already was a great babyface, and now he's got this whole thing going with coming back from injury and an unexpected return, and it's just be like, this is it's not even like a layup. It's not even like a slam dunk. It's like if you climbed a ladder and stood eye level with a basketball and someone handed you the basketball to put it in. Like, it's so simple.
Uh-huh.
And this is what he does when he returns.
Yeah, I mean, Shane needs to do a Hell in a Cell elbow drop, which is what he did, and just
Was
crash
it
through a
that
table.
match?
I don't
No,
think it
that
was
was
that.
WrestleMania.
Yeah, he did it during that feud. I don't know which match
Yeah,
it was, but it
okay.
was during that feud.
Well, he feuded with Kevin Owens. I think that was before. I think that would be like Hell in a Cell would be like
Yeah, yeah.
2017. So, um, look, like that's not how I would have used him. But this whole so there's a whole run from when he comes back, which is March of 2018, to when he turns heel in November of 2018. Now, it was inconceivable that he would become a heel because of how easy it was to book him as a babyface and how desperate WWE should have been for a babyface who was actually over, that had a ton of credibility with the fan base. And so he comes back. He does this feud WrestleMania match with Shane and Sami Zayn. Then he gets in a feud with Big Cass. He wrestles with him at the Greatest Royal Rumble. Then he reunites Team Hell No with Kane, and they feud with the Bludgeon Brothers. I mean, this, like, nothing against any of those people I just named, but this is mid-card stuff. It's not the main event. It's not something you would do with a guy who you were serious about pushing as a main eventer. And that's the Daniel Bryan story, was that no matter how over he was, no matter how much the fans wanted to see him, WWE never was serious about pushing him as a main eventer. They were, even when he won the world title, it was always meant as a way to, as a stepping stone to just get it on somebody else. And they never took him seriously. And there was, as hard as the fans wanted to see it, as badly as the fans wanted to see it, as obvious as it was to anybody who was watching, WWE never wanted to see him at that level. He was a mid-card guy that was over, but he wasn't world champion material. He wasn't the guy they wanted to make the face of the company. And there was nothing the fans could ever do to change that. And that's ultimately what the Daniel Bryan story is in WWE in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think during that time, that was the gender experiment with the world title. They wanted to get him over at
They
least.
gave, someone said this, Joe Lanza, I think, over at Voice of Wrestling said this a couple weeks ago when they were talking about this, they gave Jinder Mahal a way more sincere push to the top than they ever did for Daniel Bryan.
Yep, for sure. I mean, yeah,
That's a
they pushed him
fact.
very
Like,
hard. Yeah, it is a fact. And this is during, like, yeah, like you said, he was feuding with a Big Cass, which, like, something, like, I think there's some weird booking things that went wrong. Like, they introduced like a tiny person, like a little person, into that feud because Big Cass was talking about how bigger he was than Daniel Bryan. It was so bad. And then, yeah, he was feuding with the Bludgeon Brothers, which, like, which they can't be good. Obviously, we've seen Brody Lee, he can be a good wrestler, but just the way he was booked in WWE just wasn't the way that he should have been booked. And so that's why the feud didn't work.
like, even if it's good, it's mid-card stuff.
Yeah.
That's what it was. It wasn't like I don't care. Like, okay, oh yeah, that was a good 10-minute match Daniel Bryan had at the middle of Backlash or whatever pay-per-view it was on. Like, that's not why you bring Daniel Bryan back. You bring Daniel Bryan back to be in the main event. Like, why would and that's basically his, especially his last few years here in WWE. That's what it was. It was Daniel Bryan was over. Daniel Bryan had credibility, but he was a guy to either put other people over or to just be in the mid card doing stuff that was entertaining, but not, but that was beneath him. He deserved more.
Yeah, just always WWE's preference to, have the chiseled, muscular, body guy as the face of the company. Which, I mean, to Daniel Bryan's credit, he's not like a chubby guy. Like he's a regular in shape sort of guy, but he doesn't fit the Roman Reigns', the Drew McIntyres, or even like the Jinder Mahals. Jinder Mahal was that big body.
I mean, Jinder Mahal got the push because they were really big on trying to get an Indian star. And he was the guy that they chose. And yeah, he got himself in really good physical shape and had a great body, but it didn't work. Jinder Mahal's experience didn't work. I mean, they haven't pushed him seriously really since. But yeah, and that's part of it, is that, Daniel Bryan, to me, it's not even the body thing or the size thing, although that's a key reason. Like, the reason he wasn't originally a Vince guy was because probably he was too small. But I think there was a lot of resentment for the fans trying to control the product, and the fans, booing the guys Vince chose and cheering for Bryan. I think that played into it, that they didn't like that the fans had kind of steered the creative process in sort of a way where they felt like they had to push this guy, which is such a stupid, like, it's so, like, if you explain it to anybody else that has any form of business experience, it's the dumbest thing in the world. It's like, yeah, there was this guy that was really successful and popular and would have made a lot of money, but like, he wasn't like a guy they really wanted. So like, they try to sabotage him at every turn, as opposed to being like anyone else that was running a business that basically stumbled upon this really successful money-making idea. They would just go with it. And yet, because it's Vince and because it's wrestling and it's WWE, it's like this, it sounds so dumb when you explain it to people. Like,
yeah, I mean, the equivalent of that is, the fans love Falcon so much, but Marvel instead wanted Bucky to be Captain America instead. We're not going to listen to the fans who like, Sam Wilson as Captain America. So
yeah,
we're
and
going to push
like,
Bucky.
that happens to, like, you don't always have to listen to fans when it comes to stuff, like, especially when it comes to like one of the reasons the Game of Thrones ending felt so flat to a lot of people was because people all had their own ideas for how it was supposed to end, and then it didn't end whatever their way was. But yeah, you're right. It's like, it's just like, why would you, like, if I was running a business and it was like, one of my employees was like, hey, I got this idea, I'm going to start selling these. And I'm like, that I don't think that's a good idea, but whatever, go ahead and do it. And then he sold like a ton of them. I wouldn't be like, oh, I don't like that thing I thought was a bad idea. It made me a bunch of money. I'm going to, like, stop selling them. I'd be like, oh, we're selling a ton of them because, that's how we're going to make money. It's so dumb. But so they do this thing. He feuds with The Miz at SummerSlam and Hell in a Cell. Both matches he loses through, like, just like, it's such a dumb WWE thing. Like, when you read about it, like, he loses to Miz when Miz hit at SummerSlam, when Miz hits him with the pair of brass knuckles. Then he loses to Miz at Hell in a Cell in a mixed tag match where he tagged with Brie Bella against Miz and Maurice pinned Brie Bella. So Daniel Bryan lost to The Miz. It just, I have no memories of that match. I can just imagine that people were like, this was dumb. And then after that, he turns heel and he beats AJ Styles for the WWE Championship with a low blow. And he's a heel. And I think that when you look back, first of all, it was ridiculous to think that he was a heel. When you think about where he was earlier that year, how easy it was as a babyface, he's now a heel. But when he was a heel and he does the whole Planets champion and the new Daniel Bryan, and he's got the world title made out of wood, I think that people look back on that and they say, oh, Daniel Bryan was a great heel. He was very entertaining and his promos were good. And that's true, but I think it kind of misses the point that Daniel Bryan should have never been a heel. And that it was ridiculous that he had a heel run as a champion, and he got a way more sincere push as a heel as the champion than he ever did as a babyface.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing you put out, like when he comes back in March and November he turns heel, like, that's way too soon. I think the heel turn should have come during the title run, like it's like CM Punk's heel turn came, where like it rejuvenated his, it wasn't like stale, it was kind of stale, but he was still over as a babyface. But even as a heel, he came more over with Paul Heyman, and I think that what should happen with Dan Bryan. Like, I think on the surface, Dan Bryan, he can turn heel, but it was too soon to turn him heel in just a few months. You turn him heel after a year or two when people are sort of, kind of cooled off a bit on the whole Dan Bryan comeback story. You can turn him heel, and now people can, they can hate him or just even enjoy more of his work as a heel. I think that's just the big thing there. Because, yeah, like I enjoyed the new Daniel Bryan run, but yeah, I do agree that it came way too soon, and it probably came during like after he held the belt for like what 3 or 6 months or so as a babyface, and then he holds the title as a heel for another 3 or 6.
Yeah, I mean, in my perfect world, Daniel Bryan's never turning heel because he's so over as a
Yeah,
babyface. Part of the reason
for
that
sure.
he turned heel in November was because he had been wasting away as a babyface doing a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of stupid shit, like feuding with The Miz and losing to The Miz a bunch of times and feuding with the Bludgeon Brothers and doing all of these things that he shouldn't have been like doing. It's like he didn't grow stale. He like it kind of when he turned heel, it was like, oh, well, I guess they turned him heel because what else are you going to do? Because
Mm-hmm.
he's just kind of floating around the mid card right now. And he should have never been in that position in the first place. He should have been at the top. They should have been marketing the hell out of how inspirational this guy is. He should have been feuding with all of the top names. He should have been doing all of this stuff as a great baby face that we all know that he's capable of. There was no reason, there shouldn't be a reason to turn him heel. But I think part of the reason that he turned heel and people were like, oh yeah, his heel run was good and stuff was because he hadn't been used properly as a babyface at all.
Yeah, for sure. And like obviously his heel run, it got cut. It kind of got cut short. I mean, you could also say like it kind of ran its course as well, because like you said, like he was better as a babyface. But yeah, he drops the title to Kofi Kingston for Kofi Mania. It was well deserved because that was the better story there. And then they kind of kept him as a heel after that for a bit too long. Like they kind of kept the Eric Rowan partnership going
Oh,
for a bit too long. Yeah, they're
oh,
trying to go after the tag
the
titles, and he's back to the mid
post,
card.
yeah, the post WWE, like when he drops the title to Kofi, the post run between then and when he becomes babyface is rough. I think
Mm-hmm.
people, since Roman Reigns has come back and turned heel and has had the Paul Heyman pairing, and Heyman obviously has some control over SmackDown's major angles because he's controlling, he's writing Reigns' angles. I think people um, remember that like SmackDown's a good show, Raw is the bad show.
Yep.
But at this time period, Raw was considered a better show. Heyman was running Raw at the time, and SmackDown was like an unbelievably bad show. It was disconnected, and one of those things was the Roman Reigns. It feels like it's a million years ago, but it wasn't that long ago. Like the whole Roman Reigns angle with like he got all those boxes pushed on top of him, and there was this long angle with like this guy that looked like Eric Rowan who did
Yep.
it, and there was like this thing, and there was a doppelganger of Eric Rowan, and Daniel Bryan was denying that it was Eric Rowan, and he was like Daniel Bryan was a heel, and then eventually like it was just so bad, and then eventually Rowan turns heel on Bryan, says it was him, attacks Daniel Bryan. Roman Reigns makes the save, and then it's kind of like Roman Reigns and Daniel Bryan um, are like the babyface tag team for a brief period of time in fall of 2019. Um, and then from then on, like he just goes right back to the mid card. Like Reigns was the guy they wanted to push on SmackDown. Obviously, Brock Lesnar was, I think, the champion at the time, and yeah, he was because Kofi would drop the title to Brock in the first
Mm-hmm.
episode of SmackDown. And then throughout 2020, weird run for Daniel Bryan. He had a feud with Drew Gulak. He feuded. He was just a mid card guy, and he kind of morphed into this guy who, and he's been very honest about this, who just wanted to put people over and wanted to work with people that he thought he could help get over. And for someone like Gulak, like they had good matches. It was interesting. It was the high point of Drew Gulak's time in WWE so far. But after the feud with Daniel Bryan was over, Drew Gulak went right back to 205 Live or main event or chasing Akira Tozawa for the title. Like it didn't, he lost to Drew Gulak, and then WWE didn't care at all that like Bryan had put him over. It was like, all right, good job, Brian. You feuded with that guy you wanted to, but we're not going to do anything else with that guy. And that was kind of like what he did for a while in 2020 until, came back and started feuding with the well, we'll get to that later. Just what do you think about the Drew Gulak feud and like how Brian has been used over his last year or so in WWE?
Yeah, I think the only big takeaway from it is that it showed that Daniel Bryan has had enough clout within WWE to actually, decide what he wanted to do. Like, hey, I want to put Drew Gulak over. Sure, why not? And it's a kind of a double-edged sword. At one point, it's good that Daniel Bryan has more control over what he does, but at the same time, like they just let him do whatever he wants because they're not doing anything with him. It's a weird double-edged sword kind of thing there because yeah, it's good he has more control, but they don't really care because that's just a mid-card thing that no one really cares about, and there's no real story there. But yeah, at the same time, like we want to see more of these guys on television. We want to see Drew Gulak on television, and that was the only way to do it because Daniel Bryan was in his corner. And so, it's a weird double-edged sword kind of thing there that like, you appreciated Daniel Bryan for what he's trying to do, trying to get more guys over, which is what WWE should be doing as a company. Like it shouldn't be one job to get other people over, but that Daniel Bryan took it upon himself because he sees all the talent in WWE. Like he remarks about that all the time in interviews. Like, oh, there's so many people I want to wrestle. From the Matt Riddles, the Keith Lees, and all that stuff. He wants to wrestle everybody on the roster. He took it upon himself to do that on SmackDown, and Drew Gulak was a big part of that.
Yeah, I think something that can bother people if you're a top star is you do a job, you job out to a guy, you put a guy over, and then the company doesn't do anything with the guy you put over. It makes their sacrifice look meaningless. When Big Show was on Talking Jericho, kind of talking about his end of his WWE run, and he said, he was supposed to win the Andre the Giant Battle Royal, the first one, and they, towards the end they were like, actually we want Cesaro to win. And Big Show was like, okay, that's fine. I have no problem losing to Cesaro. He's an awesome talent. Then they did everything. He did the whole spot where he slammed him and tossed him out of the ring, and it was like. And then after that, they did nothing with Cesaro. He won it and he went away. And Big Show was saying, like, or Paul White was saying, like, it was kind of annoying to, I'm a professional. I do my job. I put this guy over because you tell me that we're going to make this guy a star, and then you don't do anything with this guy. Why would I put a guy over if you're not going to push him afterwards? What's that benefit? That doesn't benefit me, and it doesn't benefit him, really. And I think that's something that can be there. But one of the other things is like, so Daniel Bryan, the way he operates is very unselfish. Like you said, putting over Drew Gulak, wants to put over all these people. And he's got the stroke, I guess, backstage to say, oh, yeah, fine. You want to feud with Drew Gulak? Here you go. Here's 4 weeks with Drew Gulak. But part of the problem is that like Daniel Bryan needed to be a little bit more selfish if he has any form of booking control, because WWE was never going to push him really as a top guy. If he has some clout backstage, he should be using it to push himself, because at the end of the day, you can't just keep jobbing to everyone and keep your relevancy. He needed to have more wins. He needed to win his feuds. But all he did was lose. He lost to Drew Gulak. He did this long feud with Roman Reigns that he lost. It just, like, if you have that kind of, like, control backstage, he needed to, I think, be a little bit more selfish. Like, if, say, he comes to AEW, like, he should win some matches. Like, he should win his first feud, really, unless it's like with a very top, unless he immediately feuds with like a top guy. Like, maybe he shouldn't win his feud with Kenny Omega, but if he comes in, he should win some feuds because he needs to. I know he's a top guy, he'll always be over, but I think he needs to reestablish himself as, I am a top star, I am a dominant figure, and if you beat me, it's really going to mean something because I don't lose often.
Yeah. I mean, they're just doing that exact thing right now. Christian Cage, he has had a lot of matches right now, but the matches he has had, he's gone over, already established as a contender, at least a possible contender to Kenny Omega's title. So that when Kenny Omega beats him, it means something. Like, oh, Kenny Omega beat Christian Cage. Oh my God, he broke Christian's, streak if he goes undefeated, or 6-0, whatever. By the time, if he does win the Casino Battle Royal, it means, like wins and losses should mean something. It's a very simple thing, but WWE has just found that for so long that fans are just kind of used to it. Like like ever that person lost, and they'll always get back over another time. But more often than not, it's like people just lose all the time, and they find they have a very hard time trying to get back to the top. And that's very, it's very difficult to try to rebuild your reputation once you have it. If you have that reputation, you have to do whatever you can to keep it. And when you do lose, it means something.
Yeah, and that's when I kind of got the sense about Daniel Bryan. It was like, Daniel Bryan, it's great that he wants to put everyone over, but he could have afforded to, I guess, have been a little bit more selfish. And, it shouldn't have come to that. Like, WWE should, WWE should be pushing him, protecting him better because he's a top star. And that he shouldn't be like having to, politic for himself to make sure that he's going to win. Everything about it was so strange. It seemed like such a waste of potential. Even though he gave us some good memories, like his heel run as a champion was good. Like you can go back and watch those promos and the matches and all that stuff comes across as really well. But it's not as good as it could have been. It should have been so much better. It should have been him as this organic, super over baby face that could have put over people as that figure. And it would have been better because people would have seen him as a bigger star who didn't lose often. Even though he still is a big star and he'll always be over, if his MO is like, oh, well, he loses a lot, then even though he's still a big star, the victory isn't going to mean that much if he just loses all the time. It's like, oh, yeah, Daniel Bryan, he's over. He's got the yes chance. He was this big star, but he loses all of his matches, so it doesn't mean anything if he does the job. Like that happened with Jericho in WWE, to be honest. It was like Jericho kept coming back and he'd feud with some people, but he always lost and he understood his role. And everyone lauded Chris Jericho for being very unselfish and coming back and putting over Kevin Owens and putting over CM Punk and putting over AJ Styles. Like it was, a good job for you, Chris Jericho, for doing all that. But at the same time, it became kind of cynical where it's like, oh yeah, Jericho came back and he's going to lose to some modern, whatever guy he's going to want to do. You have to be a balance to really make those losses when you do put people over, really make them count.
Yeah. I mean, just compare that to his, compare the New Japan run where he comes in and, his record is pretty even, but then he beats Naito for the IC title, establishing himself right away.
Credibility.
So that when, he builds credibility. And then when Naito does beat him at Wrestle Kingdom, that means something. Like, hey, he won, he got his win back against Jericho at Wrestle Kingdom. And then obviously, subsequent feuds after that with Kenny Omega and Okada.
Well, he feuded with Omega. He feuded with Omega first.
Yeah, right. It was Omega,
then
Naito, Okada.
And he beat Naito for the title. He beat Evil on a title defense. Like he established some credibility. It's okay if he lost right away because he's Chris Jericho and he's a big star. Mm-hmm. So you can do that, but you're right. He didn't just come in and put over a bunch of all of New Japan's top guys right away. He did eventually, but he did work to establish himself with credibility. It's the same thing with his run in AEW. He came over. He was the first AEW champion. He beat a bunch of people. He got his new finisher over. He did all of these things. And then when he eventually did lose to Moxley, it was, it meant something because Jericho had a long standing run as champion. Like it's dumb to even have this conversation. It's so obvious in wrestling that, if you lose less, the times you do lose will mean much, much more than if you lose all the time. And that when the top stars lose, it should be rare and it should mean something. That is a fundamental rule of pro wrestling. But yeah, I mean, even looking at like his last few days in WWE, again, what a weird way for him to go out. So he's basically doing this mid-card stuff. He's feuding with, I can't even remember. He feuded with Shinsuke Nakamura for a little bit. He feuded with Sami Zayn. And then he gets like pressed into action for WrestleMania, because the idea was originally to do babyface Edge versus heel Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. For whatever reason, and I would speculate that's because Edge was not doing very well as a babyface draw, they have Edge kind of turn heel. Daniel Bryan gets just almost randomly inserted into the world title picture at WrestleMania, and all of a sudden he's once again in the main event of WrestleMania as a babyface after not really doing a whole lot, from a main event perspective leading up to it. And he, loses at WrestleMania and then comes back and he loses, on SmackDown to essentially end for what we know of, for as far as we know right now, his WWE career. So they basically just kind of like randomly showed up in the WrestleMania main event, pressed into action late in the game, and does a couple jobs to Roman Reigns, and that's it. And honestly, if WWE was like, all right, your contract's running out, do some jobs to Roman Reigns, that's exactly what they wanted him to do, and he did it. So, but again, very strange, like almost unceremonious ending, if this is really it. Just a weird kind of closure for him in WWE.
Yeah, I'm sort of curious the way Dan Bryan's impact in WWE, how big it is. Like, I'm curious if even without a contract, like if he would leave, would they just bring him back for a farewell appearance? I don't know, like maybe on SmackDown, maybe they feel like, hey, we'll pop a rating in that sort of way, even if he is signed to a different company. They might, just because like how big Dan Bryan is to WWE. Like, I don't know if they view him in that kind of light and they'll give that kind of treatment to someone like that. I don't know. Like, it's something to think about at least, because yeah, you're right. It is very unceremonious the way he left. It presumably, if this is his last appearance in WWE.
Yeah, so that gets into like what's happening to him and where is he going. Leading up, probably starting last year, 2020, he did a lot of interviews talking about what he wanted to do in wrestling, and it was often not talking about WWE. He mentioned he wanted to go work in Arena Mexico at CMLL. He wanted to go work in New Japan. He wanted to wrestle Kenny Omega. He wanted to do all these outside WWE things. And he would always kind of say, like, it would be great if I could do that and still be in WWE, which was, and like, I am one of them, like, kind of like mocked him for thinking that, because it's so ridiculous to think that WWE is just going to let you do all these non-WWE things. Like, do you know who you're working for?
Yeah.
But his motive, but like leading up, now part of it I kind of thought was a kind of a work, but leading up to that match with Roman Reigns at SmackDown a few weeks ago, where his career in WWE was on the line, or he had to leave SmackDown forever, and it turned out his contract really did expire. He, had said stuff like, he said he felt very passionless about his WrestleMania match. He didn't feel like it meant anything. He said that he didn't enjoy it at all. Which was really strange, like for a WWE wrestler to say that I was in this feud that I hated and that I didn't feel anything for, and simultaneously also saying I want to go work for all these non-WWE promotions. It was really very strange, and I don't know how much to take it. I think part of it is him honestly saying, this is what I want to do, that I want to do something I'm passionate about. But part of it also, I thought, was kind of a work where he's trying to build people up thinking that he might leave WWE only for him to stay eventually. And it's all about, people being interested in him. But what did you make of kind of like those comments that he said, and kind of where you see him, like, his goals would be outside of WWE, or now that he's presumably a free agent?
Yeah, I mean, I think just watching a lot of damn interviews, I get the impression that it's very similar to John Moxley, in that they kind of just say wherever they want. Yeah, they say wherever they want. I think if it's anyone else, I think it would be a work. But I think for someone like Dan Bryan and someone like John Moxley, I think usually like 90% of what they say is like a shoot. I think they're very rarely in interviews are they working people. And so I think I believe whatever Dan Bryan says in interviews. If he says he is passionate about wrestling, I believe that. I don't think he's just saying that just to say that. Like, he is legitimately passionate about wrestling. And I think he really does want to go out there and do all these things, like work Arena Mexico, even though CMLL is on a downturn. Like, he doesn't care. He has that dream of working Arena Mexico, and he wants all these other things. And I remember I think I rewatched WWE backstage interview with like he did with Renee Young and now Renee Paquette and CM Punk, and he talked about how his goal was never to be in WWE. Like he kind of just did that for the money. Well, like he didn't say that exactly, but that's kind of what he hinted at, was that like he was in the play struggling financially, and WWE was a good way to get a lot of money, save up, and for his family and for his future. And I think at this point, I would think he has enough money to saved up for his family, especially with Brie and her reality television stuff. Like they're making enough money for their two kids, and so I feel like he may see that as an opportunity to go out and do what he wants, similar to Jon Moxley in a way, where Jon Moxley has presumably made enough money in WWE to where he can work these very small indie shows, work all these super indies like GCW or Bloodsport, and just pursue his passions. And I feel like Daniel Bryan might be that in that similar way. That's the impression I get. Obviously, he is probably thinking about that. Where he is at in life and where he sees his future for his kids. I think that's where his focus is going to be at.
Yeah, Moxley, when he left, he didn't say any of this when he was still in WWE, which Bryan is the difference between him and Bryan.
Mhm.
But Moxley said, I wasn't passionate about wrestling in WWE, and I want to do this and I want to do that. And you look at what his last 2 years have been, and he's done all of those things. And some of them have been big, like so obviously what he's done in AEW, or wrestling in the G1 and all those things. And some of them have been small, like doing Bloodsport and confronting Nick Gage. And it's hard to see Moxley doing that, and then seeing Bryan say that he has kind of similar wide-ranging goals where he wants to do all these little things in pro wrestling, and he wants to help pro wrestling, and he wants to help it grow everywhere. It's kind of hard for him to see. I think when I see Moxley coming out and he's wrestling Nick Gage and the crowd's going crazy and there's 500 people there, I think if Bryan's serious, then there's nothing stopping him from going out and doing this. And that's one of the key takeaways. And that's kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to say I'll lose respect from him if he just, shows up at WWE again, but and doesn't do any of this. But it's hard to take him seriously when he's saying, "Oh, these are my dreams. I want to do all this," when there's nothing stopping him from doing those things. Because, like you said, everything I've heard about the guy is that he's not like a materialistic person. That he doesn't need tens and tens of millions of dollars. He's made a lot of money in WWE. His wife is a millionaire in her own right. Like, it's not like they're strapped for cash, and that it's different when you're an indie wrestler and WWE waves some money in front of you and you take it. Daniel Bryan's far beyond that. And there is this idea for some people that's like, if Daniel Bryan, he'll sign WWE because it's the most money, and you do whatever you take for the most money. And it's like, WWE might offer him the most money, but it's not like he's not going to be able to make a ton of money in AEW and New Japan, and he can name his price in the indies, and God knows what kind of business he's going to do on Pro Wrestling Tees if he opens up a Pro Wrestling Tees store, which I'm sure he would. Like, he's going to make millions outside of WWE. I'm very, very confident in that. It's not going to be like, it's either WWE offers you this long-term security that you have to take, or you're like going to work like on a per date basis on all these little indie shows. Maybe maybe before AEW, before New Japan really took off in the United States, that might have been the case, but it's not the case anymore. There's so much money to be made if you're a top guy. Like, I don't know how much money Moxley is making now compared to what he made in WWE, but Jon Moxley is not strapped for cash. Okay. He's doing everything he wants to do, and he's making a lot of money. Everyone would want to have him. AEW is, they just signed a deal to make even more money off of their television contract, and then there's more demand for content from their end. He's going to make plenty of money, so that's not the factor. What will come down to it is, does he want to actually do these things, or does he just want to stay in WWE and be a mid-card guy and maybe get a world title shot, or put younger wrestlers over, which, by the way, he could do in any promotion, not just WWE. If he's serious, if we can take everything he said at face value, I can't see him going back to WWE. unless there's a really, really specific personal reason, like he feels like he owes it to them, or he doesn't want to do anything that might hurt his wife's standing. But I don't think that's going to really be a factor. I don't think that talent thinks that way. It's not like, Miro, I guess, I don't know if you can describe what's happening to Lana as a push, but like, I don't know if they're really punishing people. It doesn't matter. Like, I really don't think Bryan's like, I can't go to AEW because I'm worried WWE is going to bury Brie Bella, when Brie Bella is like, not even an active member in WWE anymore. I can't see him going back to WWE if he's that serious about, wanting to do all of these various things in wrestling that you can't do if you work for WWE. You can main event WrestleMania, you can do that, but you're not going to be going to Arena Mexico. You're not going to be in the G1. You're not going to be showing up on an indie show wrestling, Nick Gage in some sort of crazy death match, which I don't know, like people were speculating like what would happen like with Daniel Bryan wrestle Nick Gage, and it's like, that would draw money though. Like if that happened, like Daniel Bryan's gonna wrestle Nick Gage, it's gonna be just this ridiculous styles clash, and like Daniel Bryan's got a light tube and he's smashing it over Nick Gage's head. Like I don't even really like enjoy Nick Gage's act that much, but I would be so into that match if it happened.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, another case, like anecdote of like how unmaterialistic Dan Bryan is. Like in that same backstage interview, he said like, "Oh, I hate Disney. I hate Disneyland. But I saw my daughter. I took her to Disneyland. Her eyes lit up. She was so happy. I loved it." And I'm like, okay, like that shows how unmaterialistic Dan Bryan is. He hates Disneyland, but he only likes it because his daughter likes it, and her daughter likes it because she's a kid. And then it just shows how unmaterialistic Dan Bryan is. So I 100% agree that like money is not a driving point.
And even
like,
if it was, he'd still be making plenty. Like it's not
exactly.
like his kid is gonna. Some people do think that way. Like I mean, when Seth Rollins said this, they're taking food off of my table with AEW. It's like, okay, like yeah, you're really like, this is really like, it's not like you're like a union worker and they're sending some scabs in to take your job. Like it's no one's gonna be, no one at that level is getting food taken off of their table.
Yeah,
exactly. They're actually making more money because there's more competition, but
even the TV deals are getting more expensive. I mean, you can like sell a book. Like John Moxley has a book coming out soon. He's gonna make a ton of
book that presumably he
money
wrote.
Off that book.
Like the Daniel Bryan book is really good, but there's also parts in that book where Daniel Bryan like has said like he didn't write them. Like they're just like half ghost written, and like he's gonna have so kind of moving on from his time at WWE and just looking at what do you want to do some fantasy booking about his return? Like what do you think would be good things for Daniel Bryan to do if he does show up outside of WWE, assuming he's going to have some flexibility like Moxley?
Right. I mean, this is like a little thing that I thought of while watching AEW Dark. I was watching Dante Martin, and the top flight gear has changed to the maroon and white, and so AEW like pairing up the veterans with the younger talent. And so I kind of have this weird idea of having Dan Bryan come to AEW, and once his brother Darius comes back, have Daniel Bryan be like the manager, mentor, top flight, and go back to the maroon Daniel Bryan colors and just be a color match with those guys. I just think like I don't know, like obviously stylistically, like Daniel Bryan's not really a high flyer like those guys, but like stylistically they don't really match up. But I just think that's a really cool idea just to get those guys over, because I just enjoy top flight so much.
I think that Daniel Bryan would love to go on AEW Dark and lose to random like indie people that they bring in. I think he would enjoy that. He'd love the challenge of working with them. He'd like the idea of helping them. I could see it sounds like, yeah, okay, they're probably not going to use Daniel Bryan that way, but I bet you he'd be game for that. Yeah, I mean, I think if he leaves WWE, it would be very surprising if he didn't work in AEW. He's friendly with some of the people in AEW. It's obviously a place that would pay him a lot of money. Again, money maybe isn't always the motivating factor, but has a lot of people that he'd be interested in wrestling. I'm sure he said it. He's interested in wrestling Kenny Omega. Even the things like Moxley versus Jericho. Basically, Daniel Bryan. Is there a single person on AEW's roster that you would not want to see Daniel Bryan wrestle?
I know. I mean, I even Peter Avalon. I see Dan Bryan versus Peter Avalon in a weird way.
Yes, that could work. Like I could see
Yes,
that being like a really entertaining, like 10-minute, 5-minute TV match. If only for like just comedy. Do it on Dark. I don't care. There's
exactly.
a Daniel Bryan versus every single person on the roster, and like don't even get me started on Daniel Bryan versus Darby Allin,
Hmm.
Daniel Bryan versus Ray Phoenix, Daniel Bryan versus Orange Cassidy. Like
Oh my
all of
god.
this stuff in its own way is very very enticing. So but if I was fantasy booking, if I had the book, if I had the pencil, soon Daniel Bryan does not because the contract expired. He does not have a 90-day release clause, so he can show up at any time.
Yeah.
Double or Nothing has, is going to be full capacity. It's going to be a full crowd. I don't know if tickets. I don't think are on sale yet, but
I think they went on sale.
are they? Is it sold out? I have no idea.
I almost sold out.
Okay.
Like I think there's like a handful of tickets left.
So assuming that's accurate, that the virtual sellout, they're gonna have they're not gonna have a bigger crowd than like WrestleMania because the stadium's so much bigger, but they will have the most like compact, realistic looking crowd that we have seen in wrestling since the pandemic started. That would be when you would want to bring in someone who's just gonna get a giant pop from the fans. That would be when I would want to bring in Daniel Bryan. I think that an ideal thing would be the triple threat match is the main event. Kenny Omega retains, celebrating in the ring. So very similar to how Moxley made his debut. Bryan his music, play the final countdown, his independent music. Tony Khan's licensing that. Play that. Yeah, I mean, you can even play his WWE music because that's just cannot what's the term uncopyrighted classical music, so you could do that. Either one works. I prefer Final Countdown just because I think the fans would eventually learn to sing along and it would be rad. But he just comes out, and just what a moment that would be for pro wrestling. He comes out, he can knee Kenny Omega, he can basically just do the Moxley debut with Daniel Bryan. I think it would get the buzz would be unbelievable. You're coming off of a pay-per-view Revolution where you just have like the worst case scenario for like what the buzz is like after your pay-per-view, which is this huge flop of the exploding barbed wire death match. You turn that around and you have your pay-per-view goes off the air with Daniel Bryan taking out Kenny Omega. Like how I would everyone would be so hot for that. It would be the talk of the wrestling world. Dynamite the following week would be must-see television. I mean, I don't want to say I'm expecting that to happen, but again, this seems like a slam dunk to work. And if Daniel Bryan is serious about leaving WWE and he's actually a free agent, I can't think of a better thing to happen for him than for him to make his debut with a full arena of fans at the end of a pay-per-view confronting Kenny Omega. It's the number one, I think, most exciting outcome for me. There's other things he could do. There's a million other things he could do that would also be good, but I think for me, that's what I would want to see the most.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, especially if he were to throw a knee at Don Callis. Like, imagine the pop for that. Dan Bryan just kicking Don Callis' ass. Like, that would be huge.
Yeah, because you could do you do a finish where it's kind of like, have Omega screws over Orange Cassidy or whatever, picks up the win, and he's in the ring, and him and Callis are doing their act and yapping up. Bryan just comes out, hits the ring, stares at Kenny Omega. Callis tries to go after him. Bryan immediately puts him down. Then he stares at Kenny Omega. This is rad. I'm getting so hyped up just thinking about it. It's gonna be so awesome when it happens, which I'm reporting here now that is 100% going.
Oh yeah, it just that whole image of Dan Bryan staring down Kenny Omega. That's awesome.
I'm sorry, I don't care how big of a WWE fan is. You think Daniel Bryan showing up on Raw and squaring up against Bobby Lashley would be anywhere close to that? You're out of your fucking mind. It's this is this would be the peak. And again, he can work on Mox. I'm assuming he'd have a contract similar like Moxley, where he's AEW is very open to sending guys to you want to work New Japan, you can work New Japan. You want to work random indie shows, work random indie shows. AEW comes first, but I'm sure, like, again, Bryan has a ton of leverage with whoever he's going to be negotiating with, so he can get the kind of deal, exact kind of deal that he wants, because nobody's going to be saying no to that guy.
Yeah, I mean,
CMLL might, because if he's working with if he's working with AEW, who's working with AAA contracted talents, they'll be like, you can't do that. No, sorry, Daniel Bryan, we can't have you.
Yeah, I mean, that's all. Yeah, I mean, maybe like New Japan the same way. Like, you can't work against Go Shiozaki and Noah. Sorry, Dan Bryan. If you want to work with us, you can't work with in Dragon Gate either. Maybe those are the only exceptions. But like other than that, like he has all the leverage. He's a top free agent on the market. Like Samoa Joe big, but Dan Bryan's even bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's never been this big of a free agent on the market. And I'm sure Tony Khan, is probably doing his due diligence right now.
There's been big free agents on the market before. Like
Hulk Hogan I'm sure,
was a free agent at one point. But
that's fair.
I understand. This is like, and CM Punk would be maybe equivalent to Daniel Bryan. But you're right. This is almost unprecedented terms. I think it'd be a bigger deal than when Moxley came out. And that was a big deal. It's not to dismiss Moxley, but Bryan is a bigger star to a lot of people than Jon Moxley was, especially when Moxley was coming off a WWE run where he was like kind of at that point the third wheel in the ranking third out of the three Shield guys. But yeah, I mean, it would be exciting to see him. I mean, anything that he'd do would be great, because he has so much star power. We know that he will always do a super professional job. He's interested in putting talent over. But again, I wouldn't have him be jobbing out to people. Like, I know he'd probably love to go on Dark and lose a match to Cesar Bonini or Ryan Nemeth, but he's like, I wouldn't be doing that. I would probably have him do the Omega confrontation and then kind of like have him feud with some mid-card guy that can eat some losses, like Matt Sydal or or even like someone like Rey Fenix or Pac or someone. Yeah. Pac's not really a mid-card guy. He's more a protected main event guy, but like you don't have to put him right in with Kenny Omega, especially because you can build up the next show around that. And like I said, there's infinite amount of stuff he can do in AEW, because he's such a talented guy that you'd want to see him wrestle every single person on that roster.
Yeah, even going to like New Japan as well. I mean, Daniel Bryan the G1 against guys like Suzuki, Naito, Shingo.
Yeah, up and down the roster. Yeah, Daniel Bryan versus Minoru Suzuki. I mean, Daniel Bryan Okada. I mean, come on. Like, does it get Daniel Bryan Ibushi, Daniel Bryan Ospreay? Like, all of those are like, like minimum 5-star matches, like on paper. Like, and he can work his own schedule. He doesn't have to work every week. Obviously, mm-hmm. He obviously has said that he doesn't want to be a full-time wrestler. He doesn't want to be a guy who's on the road every week. He wants to wrestle for a really long time. He said that he wanted to be like Johnny Saint. He wanted to wrestle into his 60s and do the odd match here and there. And he will always have the leverage to do that. Presumably he stays healthy. He'll always be able to make his own schedule, make his own dates, work whatever feud he wants to work, because when you're that big of a star, you have that kind of leverage. And he's a very accommodating guy. He's like I said, you're going to always get a professional job out of him. He wants to put people over, and it's going to be a blast if he's, I don't want to get too excited, because I think it's a possibility he does come back to WWE, but it's one of those things, man, where it's like, he's done it all in WWE. We know how WWE treats him. We know what it's like when he's in WWE, and there's so much more out there for him that I'd love to see him do.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest takeaway from this, is that I think the fans really want one more humongous babyface title run from Daniel Bryan, and we know that's not going to happen in WWE. Like, it could, he could be Roman Reigns, but still, like, that's probably just a transitional.
He's not their guy. Run. Anyone that's convincing themselves that he's not their guy. Look, when he had a chance to go to AEW 3 years ago, before AEW was officially a thing, but his contract did come up in, I think, in the fall of 2019 or 2018. 2018, because it would have been a 3-year deal. And he did choose to resign with WWE. He could have left and done big programs in New Japan and Mexico if he wanted to. He decided to go to WWE, or stay with WWE. And the result was, pretty middling results on that end. And but at the time, people would say like, "Oh, think about all the stuff Daniel Bryan can do in WWE," and he didn't do a lot of them. Like he never wrestled Johnny Gargano, and he never wrestled Tommaso Ciampa. How crazy is it that he was like the dream match for so many people was Daniel Bryan versus Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels was his trainer. They even teased it at certain points when Daniel Bryan was feuding with Triple H. Shawn Michaels was retired, wasn't going to come out of retirement, wasn't going to do it. Shawn Michaels comes out of retirement. He has another match, which I think people are all want to forget because it was predictably, what it was, which was a match in Saudi Arabia against Undertaker and Kane, teaming with Triple H, meant nothing. People don't remember the match at all, other than the curiosity of it. Shawn Michaels wrestling another match. It's crazy to me that Shawn got himself in ring shape and got ready to wrestle a match. He didn't wrestle Daniel Bryan, which should have been the main event of a WrestleMania or a SummerSlam or a big show or something like that. Again, there's still some possibilities in WWE for Daniel Bryan. There's still people, especially in NXT. Like a lot of people said, oh, if he's leaving SmackDown, maybe he'll go to NXT. And that would be more interesting to me than if he just showed up on Raw or he showed up on SmackDown again. But to me, it's just the possibilities outside WWE are so far ranging, and the possibility of him having that big last babyface run. And I mean, I don't know. I don't think he has to be the champion in AEW to be a success, because there's going to be so much that he can do. A Daniel Bryan MJF feud, that has so much possibilities given the different characters and their different personalities and the contrast between the two. Almost anything with Daniel Bryan with another talented performer is going to be a home run. So I don't know. You got anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, you're right. He doesn't have to be champion AEW, but you talk about Ring of Honor, Dan Bryan is Jonathan Gresham,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
in Pill's match, that'd be super awesome too. Even Dan Bryan gets Roosh, any of those Ring of Honor guys. There's just so many places he can go, and I'm sure he would probably negotiate that as well. Hey, I want to go everywhere.
He's not working. I'll tell you what,
my first priority.
He's not working Arena Mexico if he's wrestling Roosh. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, he has to make some sacrifices.
Yeah, maybe he'll do CM. The first thing he should do is the Arena Mexico show, so he can get that off the bucket list. So then he can work with all the people that CMLL doesn't want him to work with. That should be number one. All right, but we're gonna wrap it up there. Again, appreciate everyone who's been tuning in and listening. We recommend to comment, subscribe. Tell us where you think Daniel Bryan's going to end up, what you want to see him do. There's an infinite world of possibilities. I think people are sleeping on this story because there's been so much breaking news and big news over the last few months or a few weeks since he left. But really exciting time for wrestling fans. When we see him again, I'm sure it's going to be big news. So thanks a lot for everyone, and we will talk to you later.